Today, tomorrow, in Paris, in France, or across the world, the freedom of expression that this magazine, no matter what your feelings were about it, the freedom of expression that it represented is not able to be killed by this kind of act of terror. On the contrary, it will never be eradicated by any act of terror. What they don't understand, what these people who do these things don't understand, is they will only strengthen the commitment to that freedom and our commitment to a civilized world.
Let's hope that's true. And welcome back to Hardball. The news at this hour, NBC News is reporting that one of the terrorist suspects has been killed and the other two are arrested. Well, today's attack was an attack on free speech, of course. Author Salman Rushdie, who was forced into hiding after Iran's supreme leader issued a death fatwa against him because his book, The Satanic Verses, was considered offensive to Islam, issued a powerful statement of his own today. Rushdie said, "I stand with Charlie Hebdo, as we all must, to defend the art of satire, which has always been a force for liberty and against tyranny, dishonesty, and stupidity." Well, joining me right now is NBC News foreign correspondent Ayman Mohyeddin and Irshad Manji, a Muslim reformist and founder of the Moral Courage Project at NYU. Thank you both for joining us. Ayman, it seems to me that liberty is the issue here. Is it a value that's shared by the East and West? Do all people share the view that liberty is more important than opposing blasphemy, even if you find it hurtful?
Well, I think the West certainly has a lot more experience with liberty, and it has gone through different phases. But no doubt about it that liberty has taken much stronger roots in the West than it has in certain parts of the Muslim world, or particularly the Arab world, where liberty across all spectrums of society, whether it be social, political, individually, hasn't taken as strong of a root. And so I think there is that fundamental question as to whether or not the tolerance of some types of offensive cartoons and such types of offensive speech are tolerated. I mean, obviously, this is an abhorrent act, what happened today in Paris. But you're right. There is a gap in the way the two societies appreciate and tolerate liberty as a whole.
I've read some polling, Irshad. I've read some polling in the Islamic world, not just the Arab world, where pretty frightening to Western ears to hear that people believe if you commit adultery, for example, you're worthy of stoning. Overwhelming percentages, for example, believe that's appropriate punishment. Do we believe that, or is that lip service when people offer these really frightening notions of what justice constitutes and what freedom should be limited to?
Well, Chris, clearly some people believe it, but I have to say that I think there is a generation gap here. You know, I've been doing work on Muslim reform for about 15 years now. When I started, the death threats that I would receive, you know, surprised even me, and I was expecting them. But 15 years later, I can honestly tell you that a new generation of Muslims all over the world, by the way, not just in the West and not just in the Middle East, but all over the world, are defending freedom of expression. They are hungry for debate and discussion because they themselves see that they can't realize their own individuality unless that basic tolerance that Ayman was talking about of freedom of thought exists in their societies.
But why do I see numbers of 80% and 90% in countries like Pakistan who support stoning for a woman who is unfaithful? I mean, these are high percentages. You say it's only older people. It sounds like it's most people, overwhelmingly so. You
know, I actually don't know the methodology behind this, so I'm not going to comment on, you know, what the ages were of the people who are being polled. But what I can tell you from hard personal experience is that, you know, very representative of the kind of tweets that I got today, and that didn't just come to me, but were retweeted by others and in that way came to me, was one from a Muslim woman, young, who said, I am Muslim. I defend fully freedom of speech, including offensive speech, and people like these terrorists make a mockery of Islam. I hear this every single day from members of a new generation. Now, here's the thing, Chris. They don't make the news. Idiots like these terrorists make the news.
Well, so, there's
a lopsided understanding here, right? Let me just finish the point here. There's a lopsided understanding. What we see on the news is what we think is all there is. If we don't see it on the news, we don't believe it exists. But you've got to look hard, and you'll find the hope.
Well, I hope that the Muslim community of France, which is a large community and robust, joins some of the demonstrators tonight against what happened
sure
out
they
there
will be.
visibly.
And I'm very sure that they will as well, Chris.
Absolutely.
And again, I think that we're going to see a very large contingent of young Muslims out there. By the way, Secretary of State John Kerry used an interesting phrase in his speech about what happened in Paris. He used the phrase martyrs of liberty, that these people who died were martyrs of liberty. You know where that phrase came from? From an imam, from a Muslim leader in France.
Well, that's good to hear. Anyway, there's a history of retaliation for perceived slights to Islam. Back in 1989, a fatwa, or death sentence, was issued for Salman Rushdie because his book, Satanic Verses, was considered offensive to Islam. In 2004, we all know this story, Dutch filmmaker Theo van Gogh was murdered on the street by a killer who considered Van Gogh's work anti-Islamic. In 2005, when a Dutch newspaper published cartoons lampooning Muhammad, the artists and publishers were met with death threats. So what do we make of it? I'll go back to you, Irshad, and I want your view because you're so optimistic on this. What do you make of what happened today? You think it's an odd occurrence, or is this start of something we're going to have to live with for decades? Where people, this whole thing about being disaffected, tough luck, you're disaffected.
Right.
You're living in France. The country's called France. It's French. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Get with it. If you don't like living there, move.
Right.
This idea that somehow France has to adjust to your thinking about what constitutes blasphemy is outrageous.
Agree 100%. You asked, do I think that this is going to go on for decades? Yes, and I'll tell you why, and this is where my optimism comes from. These folks, the criminals behind these acts today, know that they are on the losing side of history. I firmly believe that they know this because, again, I'm seeing around me young people who are now young Muslims who are now having children, writing openly that we are going to be raising our children with the pluralistic values that Reformist Islam stands for. When these criminals understand that they're soon going to be outnumbered, when I say soon, I mean perhaps in 2 generations, this is the kind of backlash that they are going to be engaging in. So weirdly, and I realize that this is a hard sell, and time will tell, but I'm making the prediction that what we saw today is not an act of the future. It is an act that bemoans the future. It is an act of backlash against a much more pluralistic and progressive future.
Well, losing sides can be very dangerous. Anyway, thank you, Ayman Mohyeddin and Irshad Manji. I like to hear the way you talk. Anyway, right now we're looking at a live picture from outside the museum in Washington, D.C., where people have gathered for a vigil in honor of the victims of today's attack in Paris and to voice support for freedom of the press.